Okay, so got that part going. Let's see, anything else interesting in the comments? No, okay. And that was a private request, so, uh, but so the person that sent that, let them know yes, and we are recording. Okay, so database. Now, we do have an entire class in database and database design. So this segment is more just an overview of that particular class. The idea, though, is if you're doing systems analysis and design, part of your designs are going to be, okay, at this point we're storing this information, and it will most likely be stored in a database. So we're going to take enough look at a database that you have the basic ideas behind it and what's going on with it. For this class, right now I have only let's see, which one is it? I think it's this one. Nope, that's where it pulls it up. Okay, there's one. Let's start with this one. Okay, so the article that you're seeing at the moment is there's a reference to it in this week's D2L material, so you can come back and look at this for more information. Uh, the whole idea of a database management system comes from the fact that we didn't used to have database management systems. If we were keeping up with which students were in class, what classes were being offered, who the instructors were, all of that kind of stuff, that was just done with a flat file. Now, I'm going to show you the difference between a flat file and then you use a language. At the time before the databases came along, it would either be COBOL or RPG that you would be using to create your reports with. Once the database came along, well, the database comes with its own reporting software, and that makes it a little bit, well, whole lot easier to use. And so we had databases, and that was just a way to kind of keep everything stored in one location. You might have redundant data in it, uh, which is one of the things we try to do away with if at all possible. You'd have two or three files that you had to keep up with, and before you ran a report, you'd have to go figure out how to sort it. And that was one of the things in coding was there weren't sorts. There are now, but there weren't at that time. And so you'd have to write your code that could go through and read a file and write it out in sorted form. That gets into the computer science side of everything, where what is the most efficient way to do that sort. So anyway, that's what we were working with, but at least we had all of the information in one place in a database. And so there was a database management system that could do the sorts, could help generate reports, all of that. Then the theory of database started to improve, and we wound up with something called a relational database management system. And we'll take a look at that in a minute. Access is a relational database system. If you're just new into databases and working with them, I do suggest Access for you to start with. It has all of the main concepts that you'll need, and then no matter what major database system you wind up with, then you've pretty much got the basics behind you. So we will be looking at flat files. We will be looking at relational database management systems. So, and that's what this article pretty much is going over. So it goes over first what was just the basic database management system, and then it goes over what is a relational database management system, and then it has all these little ads and stuff in it. This is one of my least favorite ads of all, so I'll go on past that. Okay. Blue, you have to, this is all free stuff that I find online. And so as a result, advertisements are just going to be part of it. So, database management system stores data as a file, whereas in a relational database management system, data is stored in the form of tables. Yeah, we will look at that. Uh, DBMS supports a single user, relational supports multiple users, and Yeah, okay, I'll let that stand. I might have some disagreements with part of that, but good enough for right now. Okay, DBMS does not support client-server architecture, but a relational database management system does. DBMS has low software and hardware requirements. Doesn't take much. The example I'm going to show you is in Python and put it together in just a few minutes. It was not that much of a challenge. A relational database management system has higher hardware and software requirements. So you'll see the difference here in just a second. Okay, in DBMS, data redundancy is common, while in a relational database management system, you do your best to prevent data redundancy. Okay, so comes on down, let's make sure what I've got here. Okay, storage, just as a file for this, uh, tables for RDBMS, database structure. The reading will probably make a little more sense after we go through and compare these two. So anyway, this is a nice little article, and it's especially good after the fact. Which means here's all these phrases they're throwing at you, and it's hard to visualize what those mean. A lot easier to visualize this stuff after you've seen an example. So let's just go ahead and take a look at that. Okay, so I'm going to bounce into Python next, and I'm using the software pythonanywhere.com. It's a online-based Python compiler and editor. And so we'll take a look at that. So it looks something like this when you are into the flat file. And this is just a plain old flat file. Now on this one, notice that everything's pretty much lined up until you get all the way over to class name and class location. And this no longer lines up really underneath these nice little headings. And by the way, this flat file, for convenience sake, has as its first record what would normally be considered a title, a heading row. And that's real good when things line up underneath it, but they don't necessarily line up. For old languages, that would be a problem. For new languages, nah, not so much of a problem at all. All right, you just have to know what's out there and in what order. Okay, so this is a flat file. This is about students in classes. And to do this, we have the student's ID, we have the student's name, we have their phone number, of course, their address as well. Student name is student alpha. Like I said, everything doesn't line up nice and neat in a flat file. It would be pretty if it did, but it's the computer that'll be reading this, not us. Okay, so anyway, coming across, there's the student phone, and then here's the class ID is in this area right here. The class name is running down through here. And yes, Fortran is still taught in engineering schools. Let's see, class location is in the, everybody got to try that one again. More coffee, just a minute. Okay, this class is being held in the Computer Science Building, room 220. The instructor ID is A201. The instructor name is Adams, and the instructor's office location is there. That's what it always used to look like. And you would have this data redundancy. If the student is taking 5 classes, all of their information is listed 5 times. And that's how it becomes very easy for one area of the school to have one address for a student and another area of the school to have a different address for the student. And this was all just common problems that you had with flat files. That was just part of it. So if I want to do a report with the students, based on the students, so I get a listing of, here is Stu Alpha, and Stu Alpha, here is their schedule, and here is Stu Beta Lee, and here is Stu Beta Lee's schedule, and all the way down on this. Okay, so What happens then when you want to have a list for the instructors that say, here's what classes you're teaching and here are the students within the class? Well, then that means this needs to be sorted back into instructor ID or instructor name, something. But it has to be ordered based on instructor so we can get an instructor report. So you're always manipulating the data, you're putting it in a different place, you're chasing down mistakes in addresses and phone numbers. Student changes their schedule. Now you've got to go through here and find the one for that particular student, throw it away, and replace it with the correct one. It's a flat file, and that's just where your information was kept. Okay. Now, at some point, people got a little smarter on how to store stuff, and the instructor information would be kept in a separate file. And so all you would keep in this file might be the instructor ID, and then that meant to do whatever report you were doing, you needed two files open at the same time, one that lists the students in the classes they're taking, and another that lists the instructors. And that's up to the coder to keep it straight. And what order does each one have to be in to do the report so the report comes out right? It was a mess. It worked, but it was a mess. And it was during this time that I came into coding. And this is what I started with, and this is what I learned was from here on up. Okay, so that's a flat file. Now, I want to report out of this flat file. Okay, so that means I need to have a computer language that knows how to read this and create the report for me. So here is the Python code for this. And it's going to print a report. Well, I'll go ahead and run this so we can see what the report is that it prints. Okay, let me, the output's down here at the bottom. Let me get this a little bit higher. I just did this so that pulls up onto the screen, you can see. Okay, so here's the report. Class report, heading centered, class ID, right adjusted, class name all over the place, student name. Okay, so that's the report that we're getting. So everything else that's in that flat file is not necessary for this particular report, but it would be necessary for other reports. So let me try to get that down. I can see code again. All right. So there's your heading. This is the language that is tying this code into this particular file. And at this point, we're wanting to read only from that file. The first line in the file is just a line to try to help make sense out of it when a human looks at it. But as far as creating this report goes, no, I don't need that line. So read the line and just ignore it. This is, if any of you have coded before, you're going to go into a loop here. And what you're looking at is trying to, well, let me show you the code again. Trying to make the report look fancy. And if this was in the right order, had this been sorted before, and we had all the business classes first, and the computer science class, and the English classes, what this would do is for every computer science 100, we've got one class, if this was all in order, we would have this class name. It would reproduce Fortran over here, but it would list only student alpha, student beta Li, and student syndrome. It's in the wrong order, so the report doesn't make sense. And what it was supposed to do is show CS100 Fortran and then list all the students underneath it without repeating this information on the report. Well, how is that done? That's some of the code stuff behind here. And so just, well, never mind. If you don't know coding, I'm not going to try to show you the logic behind that particular one, but here's the idea in Python. Read the next line. Now notice we read the first line, did nothing with it because it was a trash line. Okay, so now then, for every line that's left in this file, one line at a time, pull the line in and split it, and this will split based on white space. So every time you have white space, break it up into a different field. And that's how we're going to go through here. A10 is the first field. There's white space. Stew, white space, alpha. Got a problem there, so you're going to have a name in two different fields. And this will go into multiple fields. And so the way this was set up has a lot to do with how you're going to have to write your code. So whoever creates the flat file and whoever writes the code need to have intimate knowledge of the code and the flat file to make this thing work. So anyway, when it's all said and done, we're going to print five spaces. Kind of fun because the way some of these fields are done. But anyway, here's going to be some strings of characters, 5 of them, then 3 of them, then 10 of them. Here are the blank spaces in between. It's literally the spaces you see within these quotes. Some spaces, then 8, and then 10. And here are the fields that we want to print. Well, how do I know to do fields 7, 8, 9 in that order? And then do fields 1 and 2. Well, because I have to have, like I said, intimate knowledge of this file and know exactly what's listed left to right across and know where the white spaces are and know how many fields that's going to cause. Well, that's going to be, let's see, so we've got student ID and we have student name, and if we look at the report, it's on this one. And if we look at the report that this thing did, okay, student, STU, then there was some spaces in the file. Okay, well, what about this one? Well, that's actually field 0, because in computer science, we start counting at 0 and not 1. 0 is an identifier, and the way to look at this is how many fields do I have to move over to get to this? Well, I don't have to move over any. Okay, well then that's 0. How many fields do I have to move over to get to this one? Well, that's, I move over 1 to get to the next field, so that's 2. And, so that's 1 because I have to move over 1 field. This is 2 because I have to move over 2. This is 3 because I have to move over 3. Then it just keeps going. All right, so that's the intricacy of coding, is knowing that kind of stuff. And anyway, so this is what we wind up running across on the line. Where'd my line go? There it is. Okay, so I do field 7, field 8, field 9, then field 1, and field 2. Okay, so that's what we have, and that's what this thing produces. Okay, so this is a flat file, and manipulating with the flat file, and all the manipulation from flat files comes from coding, whatever language that you're in. Like I said, I did this one in Python. When I first started, all of these things were being generated by COBOL, or if you used RPG, either one would work. Okay, so that's flat files. That's what they look like. So if I come back into, not that one, let me get rid of that so I'll quit bouncing back to that one. Okay, this is the one we were looking at. Okay, so now then whenever it talks about flat files and coding and all that kind of stuff, that's what it's talking about. And your original database management system was just a way to gather all those flat files together. And that was your database, literally your database. Oh, that's kind of cool. What are we advertising up here? Oh, regex. Okay, that's another database package. Okay, so now we've done flat files. The one I want to do next is access. So let me, I'm recording this through my broadcasting software, and I need to tie my access into this. Well, let me show everybody that's going to have to wait here a second what we're talking about. Very quickly, I'm going to just share this screen, but for the recording this won't share, so y'all will have to wait for just a second. But the one I'm going to be sharing with you is this one. Okay, so hang in there for a couple of minutes, and I have to tie that one into the broadcasting software. So yeah, I'll let y'all just sit there looking at that for the class while I'm tying the broadcasting software into that. Okay, so on this page, see if I can get to this. This is going to be kind of fun. All right, and the one I want to get to, though, is access. Ooh, I think I got it. It doesn't fit, so I'll have to be very careful how much of this I keep on the screen. All right, so let me move this around for just a second. Yeah, I think that'll do. I'll lose part of the class name, but I can live with that. All right, so now then, let me come back to my OBS stuff. I think I got it. Okay, so now then, this is part of the recording. So anybody that was waiting for the database to show up is now being able to see it on the recording. Lost my cursor as I was bouncing back and forth in there. Okay, so far so good on this. Now then, this represents that same flat file. It just got a bit more complicated. All right. Each one of these, in a database, we quit referring to them as flat files and we start referring to them as tables. Then the R, the relational part of an RDBMS, is we relate the tables to each other. Now the tables that came directly, give me just a second here. Okay, coming back to you. You are muted. Okay, that's good, but that's not being muted in the recording. Okay, back. I just was checking on something in the recording there. Okay, so from our flat file that we had, that we were looking at, the only things, there's a lot of extra stuff in here that we didn't get from the flat file. But let's take a look. For one is the room class table. And that was the little listing that says for this class it's going to be held in this particular room. The instructor table is literally the information for the instructor. And too small to read this stuff, but it's instructor ID, instructor name, in the instructor office. That information was all in the flat file. But have turned this into a table that's only about the instructor. Then student table is down here in this area, and it's the student ID, the student name, the student's address, the student's contact information, the phone number, whatever it is that they've got. Okay, and then we created up here the information about the rooms. It's a room ID that says what building it's in, what physical room it is within that building. Added a couple of things to it as I started building this, such as how many students can you put in there at one time? What style room is it? And to show you the kind of information that's in there, I'm going to take you to that table. Okay, so for this table, let's see, I've got to get off over here where I can see it. I want the room table, and that would be this one. And I may have to wait a second. I didn't have to wait that long. Okay, so now then we can see in the room table, here's what we've got going across is the room ID, the room location, the room capacity, the room style, and this is a table on that. Here's the information on the rooms. The room IDs were B100, CSB 220, M050. The location for that, B is the business building, CSB is the computer science building, and M is the main building. Capacity, 30 in the business building for that one class, 20 in the computer science because it's a lab. The business building room is just a lecture. And the M050 in the main building is a stadium classroom. That particular, I've taught in those before, and taught computer languages to 100 students at a time, and it was like a pit classroom. You walk in, and the floor goes down at an angle all the way to the level where the instructor is at the very bottom of it. And the instructor is down there looking at an audience of over 100 students. And I taught like that many times. And that'll get you over your nerves about speaking in front of a crowd very quickly. Okay, so that's a table. Now let me go back and let's pick another table on this. I don't know if you can make it out, but it's leaving this stuff all across the top here. Let's see, how about an instructor table? Let's look at that. Okay, for the instructor table, here's the instructor ID, the instructor name, and the office location, and that's the same information that was in the flat file. It's just all of this has been separated out into tables that are all about the same information. So that's what you would expect. Now, here's something you might not expect. I'm going to look at the one that was in the middle here, this class enrollment table. Notice that it is nothing more than the class ID, the instructor ID, and the student ID. So when I take a look at that particular table, all right, this is all that's there. So BUS 150, the instructor, and the student that's in there. Is this redundant data? Yes and no. Okay. If it's built like this, each row is unique. There is something different in each row. Going back to the relationships on this thing, if you'll look, these little tick marks that you're seeing to the side, that's actually a key. And it says, okay, this one piece of information is the key for this whole table. Give me the room ID, that is sufficient for me to find a single row on the table with all that information. Class, just give me the class ID. And then from the class ID, I can pick up the rest of it. Student ID, instructor ID, well, this is interesting. Both of those have keys on them. And this is classes being taught by a particular instructor. So tell me the instructor you're interested in. And this table, let's see if I've got it, classes being taught, classes, instructors, here it is. Okay, and that's what it looks like. A201 is teaching Business 150. A201 is teaching Computer Science 100. A215 is teaching English 100. And so every time a class is created for a semester, you get another row in this table because you have an instructor teaching a particular class. You get another row in this table which says this class, this instructor, this student. This student, this instructor, this class. All right? And so when you're developing a relational database, you're not spending so much time trying to figure out how to code and get reports out of the flat files. You spend most of your time here. What tables do I need that can connect the other tables together? Such as, here's my instructor table. Here are all my instructors and their names and where to find them. So for every class that's being taught from the instructor ID, I can come over here and get all the instructor information I need. Relations is the big deal in a relational database management system. Okay, so now then, well, what about that report? That was the whole idea. I was trying to get this report out. Okay, there's what it looks like here. Okay, how do I do that? Well, let's see. What else, other piece of information do I need from this thing? What's something else common that's going on? Let's see if I can do this. For every room on campus, what classes are being taught in each room? And that's a room usage report. Okay? So to create a room usage report, and I'm doing this one on the fly. I've already did the class enrollment report so you can see it. Okay, so here's how I construct though. After the data has been put together, instead of having to use Python or use Java or C# or whatever language that you're coding in, when you're in the database management system, it provides its own. So I'm going to say what I would like to do is to create. I'm up here. Let me check, double check, make sure that's showing up. I think I can't quite see what I'm doing, so I'm going to move this around just a little bit. Okay, so I can see this side over here as well. All right, so back into this. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, may not can see. Let me open one of these up and make sure it shows up. I'm selecting something in the database package called a report wizard. It helps me create reports. So now let me look and see. And sure enough, those are not showing up. Okay. Well, this part of it's going to not be good then. So I'll just bypass that instead of doing it. That one needs to be done where you can see every screen that pops up, and the broadcasting software is not doing that for me. So all I would have to do is tell the report, or tell the report wizard that this is the table I'm basing it on off of this. So I would add the room ID and all of the room information to the report. Then I would come over to the room class table, add in the class ID, and from the class ID, then I could pull in the class enrollment table, and from the class ID there, that will let me get to where's my class. Look what's missing. Okay. I forgot this. I pulled up this example. This is one I use in my database class to show you can get this far into it and realize, hey, I forgot something. And then what do? You go create it. I'm not going to step you through all that. That's way beyond what we're trying to cover in this particular class. Okay, so this is the idea, relational database. There's some very basic rules that you go by. There's things called normal forms, first, second, third normal forms, and it goes up from there. But the three basic prevents most of the problems that you'll run into. So, okay, switching off of this back to the web browser. Okay, so I'm going back to Google Chrome. Let's see how that's doing. Okay, we left off there. Oh, good, the ads aren't showing. I do like that part. Okay, going back into Zoom now and making sure that's what's showing on my screen. Yep, it is. Okay, so I'm back into the browser, and I'm going to back up to this. Here we go. All right. Now then, let's come back to one of these articles and take a look. RDBMS, Relational Database Management System. SQL, which is Structured Query Language. You can either go the route I was going, like with Access, and construct the reports. And then the nice thing about that is you say what you want on the report, turn the database loose, and it just does it. Well, there's other ways you can do that too with commands, command line commands, and those are called SQL, Structured Query Language commands. So with that, you can go through and say, I want this particular table, this particular field, and go pick up this related table in this particular field. All that can be done with just typing. And if you take the database class, we spend either 2 or 3 weeks just on learning that particular syntax. So anyway, but now when you say, okay, here's a table, that makes a little more sense. You've seen one. The tables look a lot like Excel spreadsheets. They just kind of do. You can have a title across. There's a lot of things that you can describe, such as if you want a phone number to go into the database, you can actually make sure anybody typing it in types in a phone number and nothing else. That can be done. So here's some more information. This is a table. Within the table, each column is a field, such as the name field, the age field, the address field, and the salary field. For each row that you have down here, this is the information for one record within the table. Each row represents one record of data. Okay, and let's see, what is a record or a row? Well, that's a record or a row. Okay, column, those are your fields. Okay, what is a null value? This is, if you haven't seen this definition before, this is a good one to know. Null does not mean zero. Null means whatever you're looking for doesn't even exist. And that's a concept that's used in coding, and it causes lots of problems for coders. Null reference is what it's called, and your code dies, and you have to go figure out what went wrong. So anyway, not null, we're down into just a little bit of SQL talk here. Not null means that there is something there. Null means there's nothing there. It's not even like an empty seat in a classroom. It's like the chair not being in the classroom at all. Nothing is there. So null. Defaults, unique, primary keys, foreign keys. I'm sorry, the deep sigh is we're in the 8th week of the database class 2, and a lot of this stuff was 1 week that we just did the whole discussion on that. So anyway, one of the other things you'll see in the database package is data integrity, which means that the information, the data that is within the database is accurate. Okay, no duplicate rows, so we're talking about some of the normalization, which we're coming up with in a minute. Domain integrity enforces valid entries for a given column by restricting the type, the format, or the range. And that was the one I mentioned where you've got a column that says it's going to be a phone number. Okay, then here is a phone number format, and whatever the person is entering has to match that format or the database refuses to accept it. Referential integrity. So in the classes and how they were related, it pointed from one and says, okay, this instructor ID is teaching this class. Well, if that's instructor ID is out there, nobody can go to the instructor table of instructors, find that particular instructor and delete it. Because if they delete it, then that means that when you're going through and you get referential integrity, well, I have an instructor's ID and I'm supposed to go find that instructor in the instructor table and pull back the name, but the instructor doesn't exist, you got problems. Okay, database management systems help prevent that. Okay, and normal forms, first, second, third, those are the main ones to keep up with. What I was looking for was an article specifically on this, and I didn't find it before class, but I will after class, and it will discuss the first three normal forms in a database. All right. That is an overview of a database with the basic terms and basic concepts. Relational database packages are relational database management systems are the primary type system that's out there. That's just it. There's a new one, well, it's not new, relatively, it's new, called object-oriented database systems. That'll be for next week. This one is more going from flat files and doing everything with code to a database management system, and the system does everything. You interact with the system, not directly with the data. So, and this does mention it goes above third normal form. Okay, so here is what I'm wanting you to do. I'm going to have to go back to our home page, go into content, and this is what your assignment is going to be. All right. 3-4 weeks ago, we did a quiz, and it was just a short quiz over the system development lifecycle. Okay, this time we're going to go do a short quiz over database management systems. Okay, now there's a link to this. Let me see where I put the link. Oh, I just didn't make it obvious. I should make that more obvious. That might help people. Okay, right here, short exam over database management system. When you go to that page, it is ready to go, except it's going to give you 61 questions. No, because I don't know if you remember or not, but the last quiz, I warned y'all, the quiz is going to ask questions over material we hadn't covered yet. And that is okay, because I'm using that quiz also as a learning tool, not just a how well are you doing tool. Okay, so on this learning tool, I am allowing you unlimited tries. And it's only 10 questions. Okay, so given that situation, yeah, there will be questions they ask you, you do not know what they're talking about. Well, you are expected to Google for that information, learn it, and come back and take the quiz again. And do that until you get whatever grade you are happy with on this. Okay? And even though I'm teaching this class and everything, the first time I took this test, I just went out and said, give me 10 questions, and took them and got 6 out of 10. Okay? So there's material I picked up and learned too. This field of database is so broad. But anyway, so one of the options in this is that you can do the same 10 questions again and retake the test. So I did exactly what I told y'all to do, or I'm telling y'all to do. I went back, it showed me which questions I missed, it showed me what my answer was, and it did not show me what the correct answer was. Okay, so I Googled the question, got familiar with the question, went back, took the test again, and got that question right. And I had 4 questions I wasn't sure about, and so I wound up having to Google 4 different times. And when it's all over with, you can see the result down here. So this is a very doable thing that I'm asking you to do. Expect it to ask you questions about material you don't know. I expect you to go look up that material and add it to your knowledge base. All right. Questions? God, I hope y'all are still there.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't
we're
have
still
any
here.
questions.
No question.
Okay.
Yeah. Y'all have no idea what this is. The weirdest thing about Zoom is I have to just keep presenting on faith that everybody is still there, because I don't require that you have your videos on, though I appreciate it. I don't require it. And if you're like me, a lot of times I'm double tasking while I'm in a Zoom meeting. And I've actually, one of my classes, I actually have people comfortable enough, they leave their camera on while they're listening to me and double tasking. And I'm fine with that. But when it's dead quiet, you're sitting there going, oh, please, did they all go away? What happened? All right. So if no questions on this, this one is due the week we get back from spring break. And so this one's going to wind up being due on March the 24th. Now, the one that I assigned last week, that was such a brief class, and it was because I was still recovering from that vaccine shot. Anyway, what I'm going to do on that deadline is I have made it due next Wednesday, which is in the middle of spring break. So you don't have to wait till spring break to turn it in. Several of y'all already have it finished and turned in, and I got 2 or 3 emails about it's been one of those weeks. I understand it has been those kind of weeks for me too. So instead of it having to be due today at whatever time, it'll be due a week from today in the middle of spring break. And so you have 2 things to have accomplished and finished before we come back from spring break. And other than waiting for classes and seeing waiting for questions, and I'm not getting any, so I'm going to go ahead and stop this recording.